I think the major reason crime and thrillers are probably so popular is because they take you to places that us as law-abiding citizens don't generally go to. You get to experience the inside of a police investigation, you get to go into the mind of disturbed killers, and I think that's quite an exciting roller coaster way to spend time. I think also, you know, the very best crime thrillers, I think, leave you with something of an impression afterwards. You go away and you have a lot to think about, a lot to mull over and take in, and I think that if the characters match up to the concepts and the plot behind it, crime and thriller fiction is extremely powerful. Research is hugely important. I think it's a massive part of any book I write. I would say there's a fine balance though. I think too much research and I think it begins to feel very like a technical manual. You know, you're reading about very, very technical things for great big passages of the book. But too little research and your world doesn't feel familiar, it doesn't feel correct and exact. So I think there is a balance to be struck. Of course you need research. I mean, it's hugely important to have a believable world, but I do think that I'd always try and strike a balance between the two, and I'm not afraid when needed to kind of take that research and create something that's you know, completely made up, but based around the research, you know, based in reality, but something that's made up if I don't feel that the research takes me to a place I need to go. Well, my writing process has changed quite a bit in the last 8 to 9 months because I gave up my day job as a magazine journalist last November. So this past almost year has been very different to the experiences I had before that. I basically wrote all the books up to and including Fall from Grace while holding down a day job, and as you can probably imagine, that was quite stressful. You're effectively working 2 full-time jobs, and lots of writers go through the same process, so it's not like I'm out there on my own doing that. But I mean, being a journalist did mean that I was working a lot of unsociable hours and that kind of thing, and that impacts on your writing. So, you know, sometimes when I think back, I think it was a bit of a miracle that I managed to write 5 books whilst doing a job like I did. So this past year has been really quite lovely because it's allowed me to spend more time on the books, but it's also allowed me to have more research time and just more thinking time. I think as a writer you need to have that time just to sit back and think about what you're writing and where it's going, and if it serves, most importantly, the reader. And so that has been the lovely part about being a full-time writer now, is that it's given me more of an opportunity to do that. In terms of process, I'm not one of these people who sticks post-it notes all over the place or plans everything down to the you know, individual paragraph breaks and that kind of thing. I mean, I'm quite the opposite. In fact, I kind of just, as I mentioned earlier, have a sort of firm central idea, usually a person going missing and the circumstances in which they go missing, and then from there it kind of develops out, and I'll generally have an end in mind, but the bits in between kind of get made up as I go along. I mean, obviously this is one of the questions you get asked the most when you go out and talk to people. They always want to know who you see as David Raker, and I think, you know, first of all, I think I would be sitting here lying if I didn't say that a great proportion of yourself goes into your character. I mean, it just does, and I'm sure that's the same for most writers. I mean, Raker is much more handsome, much braver, much more daring than I could ever be. But at the same time, you know, some of his personality and stuff is obviously, you put a lot of yourself into it. So that's why I don't tend to particularly like to answer the who would play him in a film question, because for me, he's probably very different to the Raker that you've got in your head. I mean, and the Raker you've got in your head is very particular to you. You know, there are probably things in Raker that you recognise from people who've been in and around your lives. So it is very, very difficult to answer that. I don't particularly like to answer it because I like people to have a view of who he is. But you know, if it was ever made into a TV show or a film, then I'm sure the casting directors and the directors themselves and the writers would have a firm idea of who he looks like and who he should be portrayed by. But for me, it's a very personal thing, and I think everyone has a different view of who David Raker is. I'm very happy writing Rekha. I've got a very sort of firm idea of where he's going and where the peripheral characters are going, and I hope that with every book there are new and interesting ways in which to challenge Rekha and to take him to new places and have him deal with new sets of circumstances. So I think there's a lot more to come from Rekha. Does that mean I'd want to write Rekha for the rest of my life? Well, I'd like to. I have ideas for standalones, and I'd like to explore that, and I'm sure I will at some stage. But I think as long as people are still enjoying Rekha, and as long as they're still buying the books, then obviously I'll still want to write him. You know, if at any point people are bored of him and they really don't want to read about him anymore, then I'm sure that will show in the sales, and then I'll have to rethink my strategy. But for now, very happy writing Rekha. That's not to say I won't give a standalone a go, because I really would like to do that at some stage.